let's shift to the NFL. So the NFL season is less than a month away, and I'm super excited. We're less than a month away to the kickoff of the Chiefs against the Texans. So to count down the time before that kickoff, and before the season starts, I'll be previewing 8 teams, 2 divisions, each episode, and predicting their records, and if they're going to be in the playoffs or not. We'll start with the NFC West, one of the most competitive divisions last year. This preview, just for you to know, will be listed by my predicted division standings, from worst to first. So let's start with the 4th ranked team in the NFC West, the LA Rams. It's crazy to think that just a year and a half ago, Greg Zuerlein sinked a 57-yard field goal in overtime to send the Rams to the Super Bowl over the Saints. The Rams were on top of the world at that time, and now they're a complete mess. Last offseason, they didn't sign I don't think he's a star, but their solid guard, Roger Saffold III, and their offensive line completely fell apart. Star running back Todd Gurley wasn't the same. He was clearly hurt since last season, and Jared Goff showed his flaws because his team around him wasn't good enough. And the team missed the playoffs, and they weren't serious competitors. This offseason, they lost a bunch of key players. Edge rushers Dante Fowler and Clay Matthews, safety Eric Weddle, cornerback Nickel Roby Coleman, linebacker Corey Littleton, running back Todd Gurley, kicker Greg Zuerlein, and they traded wide receiver Brandon Cooks to the Texans with an historic $21 million cap hit. That's a lot of money to lose on the cap. And just for you to know, all the players I just listed were starters last year. The Rams did re-sign their solid tackle Andrew Whitworth, but it isn't a long-term solution because Andrew is 39 years old. It's not a football age. Way past the football age. They also signed edge rusher Leonard Floyd, former first-round pick from the Bears, but in my opinion, Dante Fowler, who they lost, is better than him. And as you can see, it's pretty obvious that this roster isn't the loaded roster that made the Super Bowl 2 seasons ago. The Rams haven't had a first-round pick since 2016, since they picked quarterback Jared Goff, and they won't have one until 2022. Think about that. This is the exact slippery slope I wanted to talk about regarding the Los Angeles Rams. When you trade for a star player, you pay with valuable draft capital. When you trade for many players, for example, Marcus Peters, Brandon Cooks, Dante Fowler, Jalen Ramsey, Aqib Talib, and there's more, you give up a lot of draft capital. And when you eventually need to pay these stars, for the stars you traded for, they're going to ask for top-notch money because you traded for them. And if they're just stars on your team, they'll also ask for top-notch money because they're stars. They want market money for their position. And when you pay a couple of them, you run into the very problem that the Los Angeles Rams put themselves into. They paid so many stars. They don't have enough money to sign players to fill in their holes on your roster. And they gave up so much draft capital for these stars. They can't draft any legit players to fill in their holes in their roster. I truly advise the Rams to rebuild, but they traded for so many players, they don't have enough draft picks to rebuild, so they're stuck. I'll predict the Rams to finish next season with a 7-9 record, and they will miss the playoffs. The third ranked team in the NFC West is the Arizona Cardinals. The most hyped team in this division since the DeAndre Hopkins trade. And I get it, that trade does significantly improve Arizona's offense. They have now that X receiver, that number 1 wide receiver, that go-to wide receiver in critical moments. They also brought back Larry Fitzgerald, the great Larry Fitzgerald, and late season breakout running back Kenyon Drake. I have no doubt in my mind that the Arizona's offense in Kyler Murray's sophomore year will be at least a top 10 offense in the league. But their defense is a different story. Last season, the Cardinals' defense was a dumpster fire, the 28th ranked defense in the league according to Pro Football Focus. They didn't add any significant defense contributor in free agency. They didn't add any defensive star, to say the least. And although they did draft the stud Isaiah Simmons 9th overall out of Clemson, I don't think it's enough. In my opinion, the defense will let the Cardinals down this season, and they'll finish a 9-7 and miss the playoffs. But there will be a very fun team to watch, a very offensive-oriented team with zero defense. They'll be in many high-scoring games next season. But they just need, I think, one more year to rebuild that defense to become really serious competitors. The second-ranked team in the NFC West is the San Francisco 49ers, the reigning NFC champions. They were the biggest surprise last season, going from pretty much worst to first in their division, almost winning that Lombardi trophy. The 49ers had a great season last year, but I truly believe in the Super Bowl hangover, especially for the losing team. For example, the Los Angeles Rams last year, they lost 2 seasons ago to the Patriots in the Super Bowl, and then they didn't make the playoffs the following year. Or the Atlanta Falcons, who blew a 28-3 lead in the Super Bowl. Sorry, Falcons fans. And they almost didn't make the playoffs the year after. And you got to admit that the 49ers are a worse team than last season. They lost key contributors like defensive tackle DeForest Buckner via trade. They traded him to the Indianapolis Colts. They also lost wide receiver Emmanuel Sanders, who they traded for last season, and also tackle Joe Staley, who retired. They did trade for tackle Trent Williams and drafted defensive tackle Javon Kinlaw 14th overall, but I don't think it's enough. Also, 49ers quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo is quite limited, and we saw that especially in the fourth quarter of the Super Bowl. If they had a quarterback of Carson Wentz or Deshaun Watson's caliber, they would have won the Super Bowl. And also considering that their best wide receiver, Deebo Samuel, former second-round pick, broke his leg in the offseason and he might have a slower start to the season, I predict the 49ers will finish 10-6 and they will miss the playoffs. Talk about a hot take, huh? My first-ranked team in the division is the Seattle Seahawks. From the far west, the Seattle Seahawks are the best team in this division. Before the Jamal Adams trade, I would have ranked them second, but there's one thing I want to know. Do the 49ers have a better roster? Hell yeah. But do they have a superstar quarterback like Russell Wilson's caliber? Hell no. Russell Wilson elevates his team all year round. Every year the Seahawks don't have the best roster, but they still make it to the playoffs. Adding another star to this roster, safety Jamal Adams, might get them over the hump. I predict the Seahawks will finish with a 12-4 record, they'll win the division, and make it to the playoffs.